Nothing about that Saturday felt like a Saturday that would end my life as I knew it. That's what I keep coming back to. It felt like every other Saturday I'd had in the last 8 years. Until it wasn't. My name is Walter Higgins. I'm 67 years old, spent 34 years as a foreman for a commercial roofing company in Cleveland before I retired, and I've lived in the same house on Clifton Boulevard, 3 blocks off the lake, since 1994. I drive a 2019 Ford F-150, gray, because my late wife Donna used to say a truck the color of the sky matched my temperament. Even, quiet, nothing that draws attention. I raised 2 kids in that house. My daughter Renee lives 40 minutes away in Lakewood with her husband and 2 boys. My son Craig lives across town with his wife Michelle. And on the second Saturday in March, Craig called and asked me to come to dinner. That's it. That's all it was. A phone call. A dinner invitation. If you'd told me that Saturday would end with 4 detectives standing in my son's dining room and my own daughter-in-law screaming that none of it was supposed to go this far, I would have laughed at you and gone back to my coffee. Craig called me on a Wednesday. I was at the hardware store on Detroit Avenue, picking up caulk for a window frame that had been giving me trouble since the winter, when my phone rang in my jacket pocket. Craig, I answered. Dad, he said. You free Saturday? Michelle wants to do a real dinner. Pot roast, the works. I asked him what the occasion was, because Craig and Michelle didn't usually do real dinners without a reason, and he laughed and said, did a father need an occasion to see his son? I said no, of course not, and felt a small twist of guilt for even asking. What time? I said. 6 o'clock, he said. Come hungry. I want to be honest about something before I go further into this. I loved my son. I still do, in whatever complicated way a man is required to love a person who did what mine did. But I want you to understand that going into that Saturday, I had no radar for what was coming. None. I had exactly 0 reason to suspect my own son of anything, because in 41 years of being his father, he had never once given me a reason to. Saturday came. I got up, walked 2 miles along the lake like I do most mornings, came home, showered, put on a clean flannel shirt because Michelle always commented if I showed up looking like I'd been doing yard work, and drove the F-150 across town to their place on a quiet street off Madison Avenue. Craig and Michelle bought that house 4 years ago, a brick 2-story with a wraparound porch, the kind of house you buy when you're trying to convince the neighborhood, and maybe yourself, that things are going well. I'd helped Craig with the down payment. Not something I ever brought up. Not something he ever thanked me for twice. I parked at the curb behind Michelle's Camry at 5:52 and sat there a moment with the engine off, looking at the porch light already on, warm and yellow against the early dark of a Cleveland March evening. Nice, I thought. This'll be a good night. Michelle answered the door before I'd even reached the top step. She hugged me, which she didn't usually do, just a quick squeeze and a, Walter, so glad you could make it, like I was a guest instead of family. I noticed it. I filed it away the way you file away small things that don't mean anything yet. Craig came around the corner from the kitchen, dish towel over his shoulder, and clapped me on the back. Dad, good to see you. Come sit down. The house smelled like pot roast and rosemary and something baking. Michelle had the good tablecloth out, the cream-colored one with the embroidered edge that only came out for holidays. I noticed that too, and again, told myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe they were just trying harder these days. Maybe that's a good thing. We sat in the living room for a while before dinner, Craig with a beer, me with a glass of water because my doctor had been on me about my blood pressure, and we talked about nothing in particular. The Guardians' spring training. A leak Craig was dealing with in his garage roof, which I offered to look at, out of habit more than anything. 34 years of fixing other people's roofs doesn't leave a man easily. About 20 minutes before Michelle called us to the table, she came in from the kitchen holding a small amber glass dropper bottle, the kind you'd see at one of those health food stores on Lorraine Avenue. Walter, she said, before I forget, I want you to try something. I've been seeing a wellness consultant, and she's got me and Craig on this. It's a joint support tincture, all natural, turmeric and glucosamine and a few other things. She said with your knees the way they've been, it might really help. I looked at the bottle, I looked at my daughter-in-law. I told her I appreciated it, but I wasn't in the habit of taking things I hadn't run past my own doctor. Dad, Craig said, coming in behind her. It's not medicine, it's a supplement. Michelle's been taking it 3 weeks, I've been on it too. You mentioned your knee at Christmas, remember? Bothering you on the stairs? I had mentioned that. Offhand, at Christmas dinner, complaining the way old men complain about their knees the way we used to complain about the Browns. I hadn't thought either of them was listening closely enough to remember it in March. That detail, right there, is probably what got me. My son had remembered something small I'd said 3 months earlier and gone out and found something for it. I felt, for one warm and foolish moment, taken care of. Just a few drops in water, Michelle said. You won't even taste it. She'd already poured me a glass of sparkling water from the fridge, already had it sitting on the counter waiting, and Craig measured out the drops himself, counting quietly under his breath. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 9. I watched him do it the way you watch anything domestic and small, without attaching any weight to it. Cheers, Dad, he said, and I drank it, because why on God's earth would I not? Dinner was good. Genuinely good. Michelle's pot roast fell apart the way pot roast is supposed to, and there were little red potatoes with butter and chives, and green beans with bacon, and rolls from the bakery on Detroit Avenue that Craig knew I liked. The conversation moved easy, the way it does at a table where nobody's expecting trouble. Michelle's sister was in from Columbus, and we talked about her for a while. Craig told a story about a customer at the dealership where he sold cars, something about a man who tried to trade in a boat for a Silverado. It was, by every measure I had available to me at the time, a wonderful evening with my family. It happened somewhere between the second helping of potatoes and Michelle asking if I wanted more rolls. My mouth went dry, all at once, like a switch had been thrown somewhere behind my teeth. I reached for my water and noticed my hand felt strange, reaching for it, disconnected, like it belonged to somebody standing a half step behind me. A metallic taste crept up the back of my throat. I set my fork down and took a breath. You okay, Dad? Craig's voice, from across the table. Fine, I said. Just warm in here all of a sudden. I smiled at Michelle. This roast is something else. She beamed, thanked me, and I kept eating, kept talking. But the metallic taste didn't go anywhere, and the strange tilted feeling in my chest didn't pass the way a hot flash does. It just kept quietly getting worse. Maybe I'm coming down with something, I told myself. I'm 67. The body sends you memos sometimes without any warning. I excused myself to get water from the kitchen. Michelle half rose to get it for me, and I waved her back down, told her I knew where her kitchen was, and walked in there alone. It was cooler in the kitchen, quiet after the noise of the dining room, and I stood at the sink filling a glass, waiting for whatever this was to pass. It didn't pass. My hand, still not fully mine, caught the edge of a dish towel on the counter and sent it sliding onto the floor, and when I bent to pick it up, that's when I saw it. Wedged behind the trash can, in the gap between the cabinet and the bin, where nobody standing upright would ever notice it, was a torn foil blister pack. The kind of clinical, cold packaging that belongs to a pharmacy counter, not a kitchen drawer. My first thought, and I want to be honest, my only thought in that moment was concern. Somebody in this house is sick and hasn't told me. I picked it up and turned it over in my fingers. There was a name printed on it I didn't recognize. Scopolamine. I didn't know what that word meant. I want to be clear about that, because I think it matters. I wasn't afraid of the name. I was worried, the way any father is worried when he finds out somebody he loves has been dealing with something quietly, alone. Craig had mentioned trouble sleeping around the holidays. I figured maybe this was for that, or maybe it was Michelle's, something private and hers to keep private if she wanted. I pulled out my phone right there at the sink to look it up, mostly so I'd know whether I should say something or just let it be. The search results loaded. I read the first line. Then I read it again, standing very still, with the water still running behind me. Scopolamine, contraindicated in elderly patients, known to cause disorientation, memory impairment, confusion consistent with early-stage cognitive decline. From the dining room I could hear Michelle laughing at something Craig said, easy and warm and completely ordinary. I stood in my son's kitchen and felt the floor of my understanding tilt sideways. 9 drops, carefully counted. Michelle already holding the glass before I'd even sat down. No, I thought. No, there's an explanation. There has to be. The room wasn't actually moving. My body was. And it hadn't started at the table. It had started the second that glass touched my lips. I folded the blister pack and put it in my shirt pocket, turned off the tap, picked up my water glass, and walked back into that dining room and sat down and smiled at my son and his wife and finished my dinner, because I didn't know anything for certain yet, and a man doesn't accuse his own family of something monstrous on a hunch. But something had shifted in that kitchen, something I couldn't unfeel, and I carried it out the front door with me an hour later when Michelle pressed a full, sealed bottle of the tincture into my hands. "Take it every day, Walter," she said, smiling. "You'll feel so much better." I drove home along the lake in the dark, and I don't remember most of that drive. I remember sitting in my driveway with the engine off for a long time before I could make myself go inside. Maybe it's nothing, I told myself. Maybe there's a reasonable explanation for all of it. I sat at my kitchen table that night and stared at that sealed bottle and that folded piece of foil until almost 1 in the morning, and then I picked up the phone and called my daughter. Renee didn't sleep light, not since the boys were born, but she picked up on the second ring anyway. "Dad?" Instantly awake. "What's wrong?" I told her I needed her to listen to the whole thing before she said anything, and she went quiet and let me talk. I told her about the drops, about the dry mouth and the tilting room, about the napkin, the gap behind the trash can, the blister pack, the search results glowing on my phone at that sink with the water running. I talked for almost 10 minutes straight. When I finished, the line was so quiet I checked to see if the call had dropped. "Dad," she finally said, and her voice had changed completely. The sleepy edge was gone, replaced with something flat and careful I recognized from when she was 17 and had found out a boy at her school was cheating on his girlfriend with 3 other girls and had, without raising her voice once, ended his social life inside of a week. That same stillness. "Don't touch that bottle again," she said. "I'm not touching it," I told her. "Is it sealed?" "Still sealed." "Good. I need you to overnight both the bottle and that blister pack to me. Not to Craig's house, not from your regular mailbox. There's a UPS store on Warren Road that opens at 8. Pay cash. Don't put your name as the sender." Don't put your name as the sender. That sentence didn't sound like my daughter being cautious. It sounded like a woman treating her father's kitchen table like a crime scene, because Renee had spent the last 6 years as a paralegal in a personal injury firm downtown, and she knew exactly what evidence chain of custody meant, even if I didn't yet. "What are you thinking?" I asked her, even though some part of me already didn't want the answer. "I'm thinking I want to know exactly what's in that bottle before either of us says another word to Craig," she said. "Can you get it there by 8? "Yes," I said. "Then get some sleep. I'll call you at 7. She called at 6:48. I drove to the UPS store on Warren Road in the gray early light, the lake still and flat off to my left, a couple of joggers out along the boulevard. Everything ordinary and cold, and completely indifferent to what I was carrying in a padded envelope on my passenger seat. I used my neighbor Hal's name and address for the return label. A retired machinist, 2 doors down, who'd lent me his pressure washer more times than I could count, and never once asked me a question he didn't need the answer to. I paid cash. I watched the envelope disappear behind the counter and stood on the sidewalk afterward with my hands in my coat pockets, looking up at a colorless March sky, giving myself exactly 1 minute to hope I was just a tired old man who'd read too much on his phone at 1 in the morning. Then I got in the truck and drove home. 5 days went by. 5 days of sitting in my own living room, pretending to read the newspaper, reading the same headline about a Browns coaching hire I didn't care about at all, over and over without any of it landing. My phone rang at 11:20 on a Thursday morning. "The lab called me back," Renee said. "No hello, no lead up. I had a friend from the firm point me toward an independent toxicology lab, and I paid to rush it." "All ready," I said. "Dad, I need you to sit down for this." I was already sitting. "Tell me," I said. "Both the sealed bottle and the blister pack tested positive for scopolamine," she said. "Concentrated well above any therapeutic dose you'd ever legitimately be prescribed." She paused, and I heard paper shuffling on her end. The toxicologist's exact words, and I'm reading you this directly, are consistent with deliberate administration for the purpose of inducing cognitive impairment. My living room went very quiet. Outside, a car went by on Clifton Boulevard, completely ordinary, completely unbothered by what had just been said inside my house. Deliberate administration, I repeated. How concentrated? I asked. Because I'd spent 34 years as a foreman, and a foreman needs the actual number, even when the number is going to take something out of him. Concentrated enough, Renee said, that taken daily the way Michelle told you to take it, someone your age would show real, documented cognitive symptoms inside 2 to 3 weeks. Memory lapses, disorientation, enough that anyone watching you would swear you were declining. They wanted it to look like I was losing my mind, I said. That's exactly what they wanted, Renee said. And Dad, there's more. I pulled some records. Somebody requested a full title search and asset valuation on your house and your investment accounts back in January. It didn't come from a bank. It came from a law office in Westlake. A man named Dale Ferris. A pause stretched out on the line, long enough that I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I called someone I know who does elder law, Renee said. Ferris has a reputation. He specializes in what they call anticipatory guardianship. He finds families with an aging parent who has real assets, coaches the family on documenting a decline, and keeps a guardianship petition sitting drafted and ready in a drawer until there's a medical episode or a failed evaluation to trigger it. The second that happens, he files, a judge signs off, and everything you own goes under someone else's control. Everything I owned. 34 years on roofs in every kind of Cleveland weather, every dollar saved and reinvested carefully, the house Donna and I had raised our kids in, all of it. My son looked at his 67-year-old father and saw a number. Michelle's sister, I said slowly, working it out loud the way I used to work out a bad load calculation on a job site. She's not really visiting from Columbus, is she? Renee was quiet for a second. Dad, her sister's name is on the guardianship paperwork as a secondary witness. She's not visiting. She's documentation. I sat with that. My daughter-in-law's own sister, drafted into this like a piece of scaffolding. We're going to do this exactly right, Renee said, her voice sharpening into something clean and decided. The same voice she'd had at 17, dismantling that boy's reputation without ever once raising it. No confronting Craig. No change in how you act around him. Nothing that tells them anything's different on your end. First thing, I'm getting you a full independent cognitive evaluation, court admissible, on the record, before they can file anything against you. When? I asked. Tomorrow, she said. I'm driving up tonight. She arrived at my house at 7:45, stepping out of her Subaru in a dark coat with a laptop bag over one shoulder, moving like a woman who had never once doubted where she was going. That walk, I thought, watching her from the window. That's not her mother's walk. That's mine. She hugged me hard on the porch, the kind of hug that doesn't need words attached to it, and told me I looked good. I told her I looked 67. She laughed. First real laugh I'd heard out of her in weeks, and it hit me somewhere behind the ribs. We sat at my kitchen table until almost 1 a.m, while she laid it all out in order, the toxicology report, the title search records, the guardianship petition Dale Ferris had already drafted, naming Craig as primary guardian and Michelle as financial co-conservator. 3 prior petitions from Ferris in Cuyahoga County alone, she told me, 2 of them flagged by the state for irregularities. He has a pattern, Dad. He finds families like ours, and he runs the same play every time. The independent evaluation happened the next morning at a neurological clinic in Rocky River, a doctor named Patricia Vance, who Renee's firm had used as an expert witness twice before. Full legal competency, clean and documented and dated. That evaluation became the foundation, Renee said, of everything we did next. 2 weeks after that, on a Saturday afternoon, Renee walked into Craig and Michelle's living room with a folder under her arm and asked everyone to sit down. I stood by the fireplace. Michelle's sister was there too, perched on the edge of the couch like she already sensed something wrong with the air in the room. Renee laid 3 documents out on the coffee table, one at a time, slow and deliberate, the way you'd set down cards in a game you already knew you'd won. The first is an independent toxicology report confirming scopolamine in a bottle labeled as an all-natural supplement given to my father by Michelle Higgins. The lab's exact language is consistent with deliberate administration. Michelle's face went the color of the wall behind her. The second is a guardianship and financial conservatorship petition prepared by Dale Ferris of Westlake, naming Craig as primary guardian, with a preparation timeline beginning in January. The third is a fully documented, court-admissible cognitive evaluation from 2 weeks ago, establishing that my father is, and has always been, completely competent. She looked up from the papers and let her eyes move slowly from Craig to Michelle's sister. So to be very clear about what happened here, she said, you poisoned a healthy man to manufacture a medical record of decline so that you could take legal control of everything he's spent his life building. You didn't make a mistake. You built a case against your own father. And so did we. Craig stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. Dad, this isn't, just let me. This isn't what it looks like. Sit down, Craig, I said, and something in my voice must have carried more than I knew it would, because he sat. I want a lawyer, he said quietly, and something drained out of his face when he said it, some easy confidence he'd worn his whole adult life, and what was underneath looked younger than I'd ever seen him look, even as a boy. That's the first smart thing you've said all year, Renee told him. I strongly recommend it. She looked at me and gave the smallest nod, and I took my phone out and called Detective Marcus Doyle, a name Renee had given me 2 days earlier, a man who'd worked elder abuse cases for the county for 11 years. We're ready, I told him. He picked up on the first ring like he'd been waiting for it. They came in 2 unmarked cars, no sirens, 4 officers moving with the unhurried certainty of people who'd done this before and understood that quiet is more devastating than noise. Doyle read the charges standing in that living room under Craig and Michelle's own light fixtures, and Michelle started crying almost immediately, not the composed kind of crying, but the real kind, the kind that happens when a lie finally runs out of places to hide. Michelle's sister sat frozen on the couch, staring at her own hands. Craig looked at the carpet the entire time Doyle spoke, and I understood from the particular quality of that silence that somebody, maybe Ferris, maybe just self-preservation, had already coached him on what not to say if this day ever came. He'd planned for the possibility of getting caught. That single fact cost me something I don't think I'll ever fully get back. Then the handcuffs came out, and Craig looked up. Not at Renee, not at Doyle, at me, Dad. His voice cracked clean in half on the word. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe 34 years of needing to understand exactly where a structure failed and why before I could walk away from it. Why? I asked him. Just that one word. The room went completely still, and my 41-year-old son, standing in his own living room with a detective's hand on his arm, started to cry the ugly way. The way a man cries when every wall he's spent years building comes down all at once. I didn't mean for it to go this far, Dad, he said. I owe people money. Bad money. The dealership let me go in the fall, and I never told you. I never told anybody. I was covering it with cards, and then I couldn't cover it anymore. And Michelle knew Ferris through her sister, and he laid the whole thing out, and I said no, Dad. I swear I said no at first. But you did it anyway, I said. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. Michelle said it wasn't really hurting you. She said you were 67, and you'd either end up needing care in a few years, or you wouldn't, and either way, and he couldn't finish it. I looked at Michelle. She had both hands pressed over her mouth, and she didn't look up at me once. Look at me, Craig, I said, and he did. You sat across that table from me and counted 9 drops into a glass your own wife had already poured. You watched me get sick, and you looked at each other over the rolls like it was nothing. And then you put a full bottle of it in my hands at the door and told me to take it every day. My voice stayed even. It surprised me that it did. That's not a mistake, son. That's a plan. You need to own what it actually is. He was crying too hard to answer me. I turned to Detective Doyle. I'm done, I told him. Craig, Michelle, and Michelle's sister were each charged with felony elder abuse, criminal conspiracy, and administering a controlled substance without consent under Ohio law. Dale Ferris was reported to the State Bar Association and is currently facing his own disbarment proceedings alongside a criminal investigation. Craig's old dealership job, it turned out, really had let him go back in October, exactly like he said, and he'd never told a single member of his family. When the house finally emptied out, it was just Renee and me standing in that living room, the good china still sitting untouched on the sideboard from a dinner that had never gotten served. I walked over to the front window and looked out at that quiet street off Madison Avenue. Bare trees, gray sky, the kind of ordinary evening that doesn't care what just happened underneath it. 6 weeks ago, I'd parked my truck right out front, happy about pot roast. Renee came and stood beside me. "I already filed the paperwork, Dad," she said quietly. "A trust, with an independent trustee neither of us is related to. Nobody touches anything of yours again without a court order. This was never about the money for me." "I know," I told her. "I'd always known that. That was the whole difference between my son and my daughter. One of them looked at his father across a table and saw a man who loved him. The other saw an account balance with a pulse." She leaned her head against my shoulder for a moment, then straightened up. "Let's get you out of here," she said. We walked out together, and I pulled the door shut behind me without looking back. The March air outside was cold and clean and honest, and it was the best I'd felt in 6 weeks. "There's a diner on Detroit Avenue," I told her. "Does a hot turkey sandwich that'll make you wonder why you ever moved to a city that doesn't have a proper diner." Renee laughed, full and real, and it landed somewhere deep in my chest, the way it used to when she was small. The case went to trial that fall. I sat in that courtroom in a clean flannel shirt on sentencing day and listened to a judge tell the room, in the plain language judges use, that what happened to me wasn't a family disagreement. It was a crime, deliberately built and deliberately executed. Craig got 3.5 years. Michelle got 3. Her sister got 18 months for her part in the paperwork. Dale Ferris is still waiting on his own hearing. I didn't feel like celebrating walking out of that courthouse, and I want to say that plainly, because I think you deserve the truth of it. You don't feel triumphant watching your own son get sentenced. You feel the weight of every year, every dinner, every ordinary Tuesday phone call you didn't know to look at twice. But underneath all that weight, solid and permanent, I did feel something else. Clarity. The particular clarity of a man who has finally, completely stopped being lied to by the people he trusted most. If you've made it this far with me, I'd guess you've either lived something close to this yourself, or you love somebody old enough that you worry about it. Either way, I'm glad you're here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and if this one meant something to you, share it with somebody who needs to hear it.